Well, thank you. Hello, thank you for having us today. As I said earlier, my name is Courtney Normand. I'm a mother of 2 school-age kids, and I'm really proud and happy to be here with you today as we urge you to recommend and approve vote for Referendum 90. We're proud to be working in coalition with parents, pediatricians, teachers, sexual assault prevention advocates, now over 140 community organizations across Washington, and over 100 faith community leaders who all endorse the Approve Referendum 90 campaign because we share the same goal. We want our children to grow up safe with bright, healthy futures, to make sound decisions, have happy and fulfilling relationships, and to succeed in school and in their lives. That means working together as a community to protect our children from sexual assault and abusive relationships, unintended pregnancy, and sexually transmitted infections. Washington has had strong guidelines and standards for high-quality, evidence-based, age-appropriate sex education for over a decade, but too many school districts have neglected to participate beyond the required instruction in HIV and AIDS prevention. And in schools where sex education is being taught, information about abuse prevention and intervention, affirmative consent, and healthy relationships has often been left out. So by approving Referendum 90, we have the opportunity to make sure that young people are not left in the dark. This evidence-based, age-appropriate sex education will teach social and emotional learning in grades K through 3 as the building blocks that kids need for lifelong, fulfilling, and mutually respectful relationships. And then it graduates onward through teaching young people about human development, puberty, sexuality, contraception and STD prevention, informed decision-making and consent, healthy relationships, valuing and understanding bodily autonomy, and how to identify and report inappropriate behavior, and how to avoid causing harm to others. So no matter what zip code they live in, every student deserves access to critical social and emotional learning, information about human development, and tools to build healthy relationships. And we have the opportunity to provide that to all people, all young people in our state by approving Referendum 90. It's really a pleasure to be working with Elizabeth on this campaign. And of course, I think we'll just kind of bounce back and forth in responding to your questions, but we really look forward to addressing them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mindy and Whitney, how do you want to take this?
I'll go ahead and give our opening statement, and I think similar to Courtney's group, we'll just bounce back and forth in responses. So yeah, in the final days of the legislative session, we saw Olympian politicians jam through an extreme new comprehensive sex education mandate for all students statewide starting in kindergarten. Concerned parents and local communities worked to impact and amend the bill, but we just noticed that Olympia politicians didn't listen. So instead, we saw something historic happen. More than 260,000 were collected, all by volunteers across the state, in just a few weeks in the middle of a pandemic, to put the bill on the ballot and allow voters to decide. We think that with huge numbers of students failing math, science, and English, Washington families believe that Olympia should instead prioritize improving literacy and help students graduate. In 2018, we passed Aaron's Law, which addresses sexual abuse prevention online. Sorry, just had somebody walk in here. And unfortunately, we haven't had a chance really to see Aaron's Law fully implemented since passing in 2018. This new law means that unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats will be developing new statewide sex education standards for all students across the state, with no input from parents, local school boards, and communities. Young children need to learn social skills and then move on to the fundamental topics for learning. Referendum 90 would introduce materials that include graphic sexual subject matter for elementary age students. In this year, local budgets are facing massive shortfalls that threaten funding for basic programs. At a time when schools are challenged to pay for core education, we cannot afford an expensive new mandate. Parents and local communities should be trusted to develop curriculum collaboratively. Schools must emphasize critical learning and prepare students for higher education and the job market. And school budgets must be prioritized to pay for essential programs during a time of extreme budget cuts. This is why we are encouraging voters to protect local control, preserve school funding, and prioritize essential learning by rejecting Referendum 90. We are supported by a large coalition within the faith community, including the Washington Catholic Conference, which represents the Seattle Archdiocese, as well as the Yakima and Tacoma and Spokane Diocese, and as well as other family policy organizations in Washington State, medical professionals, and sex trafficking law enforcement investigators. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go into Q&A now. I'm going to ask the first question and then turn it over to my colleagues here. The one aspect of this I wanted to ask about is what seems, at least to me on the surface, that is sort of the fail-safe way that parents cannot participate, that families cannot participate, which is the opt-out. It's been much talked about, much discussed, the opt-out component of this legislation, meaning families don't have to have their kids participate. I'd like both sides to talk about that, whether those are adequate provisions. We got a letter to the editor here recently in the News Tribune that somebody said the opt-out is not effective because there will be some aspects of this under the bill, under some language in the bill, which I personally haven't seen, this particular language, that would allow some of the guidelines and curriculum to be melded into the everyday classroom curriculum. So can each side spend 2 minutes discussing the opt-out provision and why that is or is not adequate? So we would start with the no folks on this one.
Want me to go, Wendy? Okay, yes, the opt-out, the loophole in the bill says that there is no legislative intent for curricula to be integrated into other subjects. That does not ban it from happening. Schools can integrate it into other subjects if they want to. It's just not the intent of the legislation to force that issue. Also, Lori Dills went on record to say that that is her vision for comprehensive sexuality education, and actually give examples of how CSE themes could be integrated into other subjects. The most popular CSE curriculum, Flash, actually provides examples to teachers of how they can integrate it into other subjects like math and language arts. We've had several parents write on our page to talk about how the opt-out failed their child, how the teacher would forget to remove their child from the class, or how their child was just taken to put in the back of the class instead of in the front of the class. Girls gave testimony at the Senate hearings talking about how the CSE rollout at their school just 2 years ago actually changed the culture of their school, and how kids were actually using curriculums and lessons to sort of harass each other, coming up to them and saying, go look at this page, and the girls looking at it and saying, I don't understand. Are you harassing me? Are you discussing homework? I don't know what's going on here. So it really changed the atmosphere of their school as far as the talk becoming much more lewd, anatomically correct, but much more lewd and in depth. And also that the kids who opted out suffered bullying for being opted out of the class.
You mentioned the name Dillis. I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar with that name.
Lori Dills, she's head of the sex ed program at OSPI.
And what did you say that she said?
She said that her vision for CSE would be for it to be integrated into other subjects. We have video of that on our page if you want to go look at it.
Okay, thanks. Courtney and Elizabeth, you want to take the opt-out question?
Sure. We've encountered this myth quite a bit along the way, both during session and during this campaign. So the Healthy Youth Act passed in 2007, and it's been in operation since then that the law requires opt-out provisions. And in fact, under Senate Bill 5395, there was an amendment adopted to even strengthen the parental opt-out, because it previously said parents can request an opt-out, but now it says the school must grant it. There's also already been in place the law around community involvement, that school districts must engage with the community on the selection and adoption and implementation process of any curriculum. And then additionally, the 30-day notification and ability for parents to review a curriculum and see the materials at any time. So those portions are still there and functioning in the law. I think that it's also important to recognize, some anecdotes about one person's opinion about integrating curriculum in schools doesn't make the law. It does say in the legislation that there's no intention that it would be integrated into our schools, but we should also really zero in what would be integrated. What would happen with a culture change on our campus? Well, we know already that our students are suffering from sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, bullying, and exclusion that happens in the hallways all the time. We know that especially for LGBTQ young people, this is a serious issue with real consequences for their academic achievement and for their health and well-being. I think it's important to really drill down to what kind of integration, what topics are objectionable here that could be, conceivably integrated into a campus culture. But we know that the outcomes, the health outcomes and the social outcomes have been demonstrated in research for at least 20 years to be the kind of outcomes that we all say we want. We want healthier young people and better social behaviors among young people.
Just a real quick follow-up for you, Courtney, if you could just take 30 seconds on this before we move to the next question. We've heard some opponents of the CDC say, why does it have to be opt-out? Why can't it be an opt-in? Can you speak to that?
Sure. I think that it's important for these programs to actually be implemented in our schools. If we want to have the kind of outcomes that we need for young people, it's actually not a controversial subject for many parents across Washington. We have polling that shows the majority of Washington families strongly support requiring our public schools to offer sex education. Up until now, it had been entire districts deciding to be the ones who did the opt-out. And so many families had no opportunity for their kids to be getting the education. It's got sound public health data behind it and sound research that shows this is effective education for young people.
I'll just add one quick thing if I can, which is kind of putting the equity lens on it, and that we know that kids, high schoolers and younger, who have parents, for example, who don't speak English as a first language or have other barriers to sort of involvement in school and understanding curricula and all that this is just one more barrier to them being able to access that information. And those are many of the children who actually have the greatest need for really age-appropriate and evidence-based information about relationships and sexuality.
If I may add, there was an amendment that was put forth before the House or Senate. I believe that would have required the curriculum to be made available in other languages to resolve that equity issue, and it was voted down by the majority party. Also, there was an amendment that would have allowed kids to opt themselves out of class if they didn't want to, which was also voted down. Kind of strange considering in this state that kids at any age are considered self-aware enough to be able to get an abortion at any age without parental knowledge or consent, but they're not mature enough to be able to decide whether or not they want to take a sex ed class.
Okay, thanks.
It's actually not any age for Washington. There are specific ages for consent for health around sexuality, but it's not any age.
Okay, thank you all. Let's take another question from board members.
Yeah, I heard some discrepancy between local control. Can you speak to that? That it's our understanding that school districts can choose between 4 different curriculums, and but then one of you said, I think it was you, Mindy, said that local school districts wouldn't be able to opt out or wouldn't be able to choose curricula. Can you speak to just the what local school districts how they participate in this?
And we will go first this time with the Mindy and Whitney.
Right, yeah, thanks. No, that's a really great question. And I think what kind of gets to the heart of this issue for so many people. The idea that there is now a list of curriculum that's on OSPI's website that meets the standards. I know OSPI cannot go so far as to say it is approved, so we can't use that word specifically. But this is the list of curricula that school districts in Washington state now essentially get to choose from. If school districts do not find any of that curricula appealing or meeting the needs of their local community, they can, at their own expense, create their own. But again, the curriculum can't just be deployed. It still needs to be reviewed by OSPI, and it still needs to meet the same standards that OSPI has put together. So it's a bit of a hollow choice when you consider the fact that it is expensive to develop curriculum. And if we're looking through the lens of a certain type of standard, we're really kind of right back to where we started in terms of the curricula that truly is available. Something that also gets kind of thrown around is that, well, school districts can take the curriculum and with their local communities, look at it and take pieces that don't fit the community and omit it. And really, I think what we're saying then is that either the curriculum itself goes beyond the bounds of the standards, or those school districts are now out of compliance with OSPI if they choose to not implement certain elements of the curriculum. So this is kind of an all or nothing proposition, but you get to pick from a menu of choices that are roughly the same.
Thanks. Other side on this one?
Sure. You mentioned that there would be 4 curricula. I wanted to clarify, it's actually, there's a full list of multiple curricula that are available. And this is not, new with Senate Bill 5395. This is how it's been functioning for Washington since the passage of the Healthy Youth Act in 2007. There are 2 sets of guidelines that the state looks to. And one is guidelines that were developed with Department of Health and have continuous updates since 2005, just guidelines for sexual health education. And it explains the research and the background too that brings those guidelines forward. But then the other one is K through 12 standards that really outline grade by grade and topic by topic what sort of the goalposts are for different areas of sexual health education. And it really clearly outlines, in kindergarten, we're talking about being able to recognize the characteristics of a friend, and in first grade, bodily autonomy, private parts are private, right? With curriculum adoption and that whole selection process, the way it's functioned with the law and continues, is indeed for schools to be able to decide they can pick and choose units of curricula. There are no stipulations in the legislation that say you have to spend this many hours or you have to hit every single point. We heard directly from a Spokane school board member who told us about that adoption process, and that as they worked with their committee, the community representatives, to go through that process, they were able to say, no, we're not interested in this unit. We like this one instead. I confirmed that with Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. There really is, we retain that flexibility. And then lastly, I would offer, when you're concerned about cost, yes, there are free and low cost curricula already that many school districts have been using and pulling pieces from. There's also free and low cost professional training and technical assistance. But even more good news is that they have just shared there is a school district in Washington that got a grant that is developing right now a full K through 12 curriculum that is fully compliant, or at least intended to, it hasn't been assessed yet, to be compliant with the new law. And the only stipulation of that grant was that they had to be sure to make it available to all schools in Washington. So again, there will be ample free curricula available for folks to choose from.
Thank you. Who wants to ask a question?
I'll go. As someone that's sort of new to the state of Washington, for both sides, for I guess the pro side goes first on this time. But can you sort of give me specifically why you think this is important? What is it that my 11 and 13-year-olds need that they are not getting right now in school? And then on the nay side, why should they not have it? What is it that really bothers you about this referendum?
Dr. Mead, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been a pediatrician for going on 15 years now, and so certainly have a lot of interaction with a lot of parents and kids. And I think that what I find is that, every parent wants to have their child have the kind of education that they want to have, and to be taught really principled things about relationships and sexuality and just their general health. But what I find is that a lot of parents are not comfortable having those conversations with their kids, or that they don't know where to start. They don't know how to have the conversation, or that they, in fact, themselves were never taught that evidence-based, really scientific, kind of solid information for kids. And so they don't know how to really communicate that to their children. So I think that this provides a baseline so that every kid has access. And again, so kids who aren't getting that education at home can access it somewhere. I think it's wonderful that the primary source of this information is parents and caregivers. But the reality is that a lot of children don't have access to that in their home.
Stephanie, did that answer your question, or do you have any follow-up there?
I guess the follow-up would, I'll derail this meeting in a second. So I think that'll be fine.
I'll just add one story that has stuck with me ever since I spoke with them. I was talking with Vanessa Corvin at King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. They're one of our coalition partners. And she told me that they have so many young people who come to them as survivors in 5th and 6th grade. And it's not because they experienced abuse in 5th or 6th grade, it's because that's the first time they had sex education. Their abuse occurred years before, but it wasn't until they were at school and got a lesson about abuse and how to talk to a trusted adult and what to do that they were able to finally get some help. And that's become just really my driving force going forward. We've got to be able to do better for young people. I cannot think of a single topic in our state where we would just leave them on their own if things are not going well at home in their home life.
Yeah, Courtney, I mean, I find the same thing in my practice as well. I think that I work in the hospital primarily, and unfortunately see lots of adolescents and younger kids every year who have been victims of abuse or inappropriate touching or other things. And many of them just have never had the knowledge to understand what they should do if that happens, how to say no, how to stop it if they have the ability to stop it, and then probably most importantly, who to talk to about it if it does happen. And so I see lots of kids, lots of adolescent girls in particular, who are in the hospital suicidal or having attempted suicide, and often have this background of abuse that they just haven't been able to share with anyone, and that they really felt like they had no control over. They didn't even have the words to talk about it.
So Stephanie, do you want to just rephrase your question again for the no on 90 folks?
Yeah, for the non-side really is, what is it about the referendum that you don't think belongs in schools?
Okay. First of all parents want a sex ed that teaches their kids to be safe and healthy and how to make good choices and have positive relationships. But they object to this method, and to understand how this method tackles those themes, you really have to look at the curricula. And the best way to look at the curricula is to look at OSPI's list of what they have already approved and how these concepts are taught. They talk about lessons in the 3 R's, telling kids that an STD-free activity is bathing together. For 13-year-olds, it's suggesting that they bathe together in order to have participate in a sexual activity that is STD-free. And it even goes further and tells them that it's good for building connections in their relationships. That follows the CSE lines of how to have a healthy relationship. But I don't think any parent would agree that they want a teacher telling their 13-year-old child that they need to bathe with their boyfriend or girlfriend in order to build connections in their relationships. So I think it's this particular method, and it's really because of how the framework, and you have to look at the frameworks and people who create it and promote it and who teach it. and who train the teachers to teach it in order to understand how it kind of looks and comes across in the classroom setting. And again, look at the curricula to understand that. But this quote from IPPF, International Planned Parenthood Federation, says that their approach includes an emphasis on sexual expression, sexual fulfillment, and pleasure. This represents a shift away from methodologies that focus exclusively on reproductive aspects of adolescent sexuality. I don't think that a lot of parents, at least myself in general, we want our kids to be safe and healthy. We don't want a pleasure-focused curriculum in our classrooms. We definitely want more of an influence in what our kids have to have taught to them, rather than having a top-heavy mandate like this one does, because it doesn't give school choice, really. It's like telling everybody you have to have anchovy pizza, but you just decide where you get to go to get it. And again, the curricula really tells and explains how these concepts, which are common sense, are taught. And I think that's why we saw in 2018 bipartisan support of Aaron's Law, which handled child sex abuse issues. And then just 2 years later, we have a split decision down party lines on 5395. And I think it's because people started to look and to understand the concepts of exactly how they plan on teaching these common sense concepts, just don't fit with what is appropriate for school or what parents in Washington want.
Any follow-ups on that, Stephanie, or is that good enough for now?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
I hate to think what this reveals about my technology abilities, but I went to the OSPI website to try to find this curriculum, and I couldn't find it anywhere. One thing that did surprise me is that it doesn't appear that this is like a course or something. It's kind of some instruction that happens once or twice a year, but I couldn't find any specifics. So maybe you could tell us how we can get access to the specifics of the curriculum.
So what we did is OSPI provided a list of approved curricula. I don't see how they can't say it's approval when they look at it and make sure that it makes the standards and then release it to schools to use. I don't know another word that you can use besides approval for that. But then we went and we looked them up. So the 3 R's is available online, free to download. We purchased several of the other curriculums, Flash and Our Whole Lives. There's another one that is free that you can go and look at. So that's what we did, is we went and looked. Now the legislative bill says that it only has to be taught, once or twice a year, something like that. But the courses themselves, some of them are several weeks long. So that's what it's not telling you, is that while you're teaching it once, the course of it could be several weeks long. So we have examples of curricula that we had to pull. That's another thing. The bill talks a lot about what they want to do and the standards and how those are. It's also kind of a bait and switch, because the standards can be changed by OSPI at any time without any legislative input or parental knowledge or anything. So once this law is in place, it can be applied to the standards that OSPI can change tomorrow. This goes through.
If I could speak to that, I think it's really important to note what the law actually says. The law requires, and has since passage of the Healthy Youth Act, it requires all instruction to be age appropriate, medically accurate, and it requires that they be teaching to certain standards, that it's evidence-based, looking at the research and what that tells us about effective health education, how to get improved health outcomes for young people. It is very much a red herring to look and see that OSPI has said this technically meets these standards, and then to apply that as though that is being forced upon every community. That is just plain false. It actually requires in the law, not the guidelines which could be changed, but in the law, that every school district must work with their community to find and adopt the curriculum and the process and the instructional materials that work best for their community. So if you have an example of a unit or an amount of time or a textbook, any of those examples, if a community finds that objectionable, or if a parent finds that objectionable, they absolutely continue and retain to have the right to not use it. So again, it's a red herring to say, I've looked through, if I looked through all of the math textbooks available in the library and I found one that I couldn't stand because I don't like the way it's taught, it might not be the one I'm going to bring to class and to teach to my class. There are many curricula available, and communities get to decide what they're going to make presented to their schools.
Okay, but I have heard reference to 4 different curricula, and if the average person just wanted to go and take a look at those, is there an easy way to do that?
I spoke to OSBI about that because I was wondering why is it not just all right there? And they said there was actually an amendment. There were over 200 amendments that Republicans put up against this legislation. One of them was about making all the curricula there so you could scroll right through everything. The problem they ran up against was simply copyright law. It's not that they're trying to hide something. It's that they simply can't violate copyright law. The Flash curriculum, a license for that is about $50. The one that gets talked about the most is 3Rs because that's available for free. But OSPI has data on which schools have been providing which curriculum, and it's about 3%, I believe, of schools that actually teach 3Rs. So again, with this red herring about, I found a lesson plan I don't like. But the fact of the matter is that all schools retain the right to select and share the instruction that fits their community.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Maybe starting with the support side, with Elizabeth and Courtney. Explain to me the science associated with age appropriate. Who determines what is age appropriate? And my follow-on question is, where is the larger medical community in reference to this particular item in terms of support or opposition?
I can speak first, Courtney, if you want to sort of the medical community answer, which is that the American Academy of Pediatrics, and so me wearing my hat as a pediatrician and sort of a child development expert, the American Academy of Pediatrics strongly recommends evidence-based comprehensive sexual and relationship education for kids of all ages, because what we know when we look at the data and through our own experiences, but most importantly, when we really look at the literature and we study this, is that kids who have had access to that type of education go on to be young adults who really are able to have healthier, safer relationships, who have lower rates of unintended pregnancy, who actually have delayed onset of sexual activity compared to kids who have not had that education, who have lower rates of sexually transmitted infections, lower rates of sexual abuse, and who really are able to be equipped with language and tools that can help them understand what relationships, and this is not just about sexual relationships, but really any relationship that we're talking about, which of those are comfortable, are beneficial, are safe, and which violate rules of trust and really mutual respect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then as far as, how do we define age appropriate? Well, the K through 12 standards for physical and sexual health education are available on the OSPI website, but I'd be happy to share it with you. It outlines in a pretty helpful table, topic by topic, from anatomy and physiology, growth and development, reproduction, HIV prevention, self-identity, and healthy relationships. And then it goes grade by grade. What OSPI was really careful to make clear with me was that it's not like you must hit each of these marks with every child at these exact grades, but it's guidelines to show you kind of where we're at. And it's based, again, on the research and the evidence that has been collected over about 20, 30 years to show that here's how we can get these outcomes that we're looking for. So just a couple examples under reproduction, it isn't until, so grade 2, you should aim that all kids could understand that living things can reproduce. And grade 3, it's understand humans can reproduce. Can you identify the characteristics of healthy friendships by grade 2? Can you describe healthy ways for family members and friends to express feelings toward each other, grade 2. And so you can just you can get that sense of it. And again, that's the kind of thing that a school district would be looking at. They'd be thinking about, okay, we're aiming toward these goals, and what are the curricula that can help us meet that also makes sense for our cultural considerations and what we're hearing from the work groups and the other stakeholders that are involved in that process. It is intended to be flexible to meet those needs.
Matt, do you have a question?
Oh, do we get to respond to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you do. I'm sorry. I lost track for a moment. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you want to start, Mindy, or I can start?
Go ahead. I have people fighting upstairs, so I'm going to.
Okay. I think that is just such a great question. I think really the core for a lot of parents concerned about this curriculum is who does get to decide what's age appropriate. And again, to kind of get an idea of what ultimately the people who kind of get to decide this, because while the schools can select their curriculum, they still have to submit it to OSPI for final approval before they can teach it. It's the only curriculum in the state that they have to do that for is sex ed. So after they figure out what they're going to teach, they have to submit it to OSPI to get the go ahead for that. And again, look at the curricula they have already approved on the list that they have already given to schools to say is fine to teach, to kind of get an idea what that is. The health sex education standards for kindergartners is understanding that boys and girls have some body parts that are the same and some that are different. Sounds pretty common sense. Then you go and look at the 3 R's K through 3 curriculum, and you're telling a class of kindergartners that girls have 3 holes between their leg and a sensitive clitoris. I don't think that parents find that that is age appropriate, but that is how these subjects are taught in a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum with a heavy emphasis on the pleasure. I don't know why you would even need to mention that in a K through 3 class, but again, it's a curricula that OSPI has looked at and said, this is fine for school. And so I think there's a big disconnect between parents and OSPI. OSPI actually did a survey and asked how many parents wanted comprehensive sexuality education, and 58% of parents responded that they did not. Yes, this was still put before the legislature. Over 21,000 phone calls were made to the legislature against this bill. They were all ignored. They had 755 people show up at a committee hearing at an early AM Friday morning, 8:30. People drove from all over the state. 634 of those parents were against comprehensive sexuality education because they have seen the kinds of concepts and the way that these common sense concepts are actually implemented through the lens of CSE, and they completely disagree with that. They are appropriate, that they are age appropriate, that they are appropriate for schools. We know kids get uncomfortable kind of talking about these subjects in classes and stuff. That's like their natural reaction. So what CSE actually does, it doesn't respect that. Their goal is to get past that. And they literally have to desensitize children to talking and discussing sexual themes with unrelated, unsupervised adults. And I think parents have a huge issue with that as well. So I think that that's a great question, because what is age appropriate is probably the #1 thing that brings a lot of parents, that brought 264,000 parents out to make sure they sign that petition during a global pandemic.
Whitney, can I ask a quick follow-up? I've heard you mention the 3 R's book. Is that the book that's on the additional parental reading if parents want to find additional curriculum, or is that part of the curriculum that schools choose?
No, that book is mentioned in the 3 R's curricula. The 3 R's curricula mentions that book. It's a free curricula that's on the list that they can go to and use.
But that's for parents, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that's the lesson.
I know. Yeah, there was a book that a lot of people were banting about that was just for additional reading for parents.
Yeah, but I think
it confused some people because they thought, oh, is this what schools are going to be teaching? And it was actually for parents whose children, might have some language barriers or something. And of course, there were some pictures that were a little shocking, but
yeah.
I called OSPI and they said, no, that was just a book that additional, if parents wanted to check that book out, that was just additional reading. So I just want to clarify that.
Yeah. No, that's a book that's listed within the 3 R's curriculum as additional. But as a parent, if OSPI is going to be reviewing curricula, then I think that they need to review the supplemental material that is recommended in the curricula, and they need to own that too. So that book as well, if you're going to write it in the curriculum, then you better support that book. They also send kids in for lessons to the site Scarletine. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but kids can go there and learn about fisting and blood play. And it's actually suggested as a site for them to go to for a good resource inside a 3 R's curricula. So while the curricula, the lesson itself, doesn't talk about these things, they're introduced to the site in the classroom.
Well, we're up against our time here. Unless Matt, was there anything you didn't get a chance to ask a question? Are you good?
I think well, one, I'm micro or multitasking remote kindergarten here, but I think Stephanie's
over here.
Stephanie's question kind of got to the root of what anything I would ask. So I feel pretty good.
Could I jump in, Matt? I have a question.
Yeah, let's make it a 1-minute response.
Okay. Well, I just like to say, I'm from the Tri-City Herald, and we are a ruby red pocket in a blue state. And what happens, I guess I'm going to ask Courtney this, if a whole community revolts? You want the community to work with the school board, but what if the community doesn't want this at all? What would you say to that?
I think that's a really important question. I think that what you'd probably be surprised to find if you're thinking about the OSPI survey, for example, is that the vast majority of Washington voters support requiring our public schools to offer comprehensive sex education. We have polling that we can show. Our polling is evidence-based. It wasn't who can click on this link the most and fill it out multiple times. It was a random sampling of voters across Washington. We did it in 2019 and we did it in 2018. So again, I think what they probably would end up finding is a reaction to this that's similar to what they're reporting at OSPI. Folks take a look, they actually come in and see what we're talking about, and they find a solution that works for their community. I think it's super, super important to note that the research shows us when we're trying to be evidence-based and take a fact-based approach to topics like this, that intending to have shame and stigma around things as basic as anatomy is harmful. It's demonstrated to be harmful in education outcomes. Sexual risk avoidance education is a rebranding of abstinence only until marriage education, and it is not effective. It's just simply not been shown to be effective after decades of research. I hope you can still hear me because my computer just froze.
Yeah, but we need to end it. I want to give the other side a minute to address Cecilia's question.
Are people still fighting, Mindy? I think your question gets to the crux of what R90 is, and it's just maintaining that local control so that communities can decide whether or not they want this particular method to be what their community wholesale adopts to teach all of their kids. And that's all R90 will do, is it will maintain that local control for the districts that don't want it. Districts can look at Seattle, who has taught Flash for years. They can look at their STD rates and see that they participate equally with the rest of the nation in the rise in STDs. Then you can look into the research and see that condom use among teens drops from 44% to 9% when they are introduced to long-term birth control, which is heavily pushed in these curricula. And so they can look at statistics like that. They can look at the CDC report that says that across the 19 risk behavior associated with youth, that the majority of teens are sexually active that are participating in these risk behaviors. They can look at the studies that show that early onset sexual activity actually increases depression and anger and among youth, and they can you can choose to use a curriculum that will actually combine this information with information on how to keep safe to actually give a true comprehensive approach to sex education.